This episode of the Flow Lane podcast is proudly brought to you by Brower. Whether you've tripped over a rogue step, overdone it at the gym, or felt a twinge in your back after a day of chasing your children around, mild aches and pains can throw a spanner in the works when it comes to your daily routine. Brower's Arnica Ease range can help you ease pain and keep moving with their easy-to-apply, no-odor gels and creams and convenient on-the-go tablets and oral spray. The Arnica Ease products contain homeopathic Arnica montana, traditionally used in homeopathic medicine to reduce muscle pain, reduce mild joint pain, and promote bruise healing. Shop the range at brower.com.au. Always read the label and follow the directions for use. Sore muscles, achy joints? Arnica is your secret weapon against pain. Hi, I'm Emma Maidment and welcome to the Flow Lane podcast. This is the space to explore what it means to live a life in flow. Through honest conversations and storytelling, we'll explore how to move from friction to flow in all areas of life, covering things from health, well-being, spirituality, parenting, relationships, and so much more. This is a podcast to empower you to live fiercely from your heart so that you can create a powerfully aligned life in the flow lane. Let's flow to it. Hello and welcome to the Flow Lane podcast. It is so nice to be back in your ears. I am your host, Emma Maidment, and I am jumping in today with a very special episode. In today's episode, I chat with Radek Sali. Radek stands as one of Australia's most successful business people and a serial entrepreneur in the health and wellness sector. He revolutionized the Swisse Wellness group by making the category aspirational, pioneering the use of brand ambassadors. As CEO, Radek created a positive working culture, winning the best place to work in Australia in 2015 and 16 and charted record sales. In 2015, Radek helped negotiate the sale of the group to the Hong Kong listed Biostime for $1.7 billion, one of the biggest private company transactions in Australian history. Wow. He now heads up Wanderlust, which is an incredible company that offer festivals and premium wellness products in Australia, a brand that I've had the pleasure of working with a number of times. In this episode, we dive into his entrepreneurial spirit. Rad shares his inspiring story of being raised by immigrant parents to working in cinemas, traveling the world to building a billion-dollar company with Swisse. Rad is one of the most down-to-earth humans you'll meet, and there is so much wisdom in this episode. We dive into Rad's personal journey with entrepreneurship, building company culture, personal self-care and its importance as an entrepreneur, mindset in business, and so much more. You are going to love this episode. Grab your pen and paper because Rad shares so much gold. Welcome to the podcast, Radek. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Oh, Emma, what a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, we actually kind of go way back in so many different random ways. Our paths have been entwined. I've taught yoga at Swisse many, many years ago. I've been a part of the Wanderlust tour and all of that. And then, we also share some beautiful mutual friends in common. So it's really nice to actually sit down with you today and have this conversation about your book that's just come out and about your life and kind of about everything that makes you, you. So I want to just take it back to the beginning. Firstly, for anyone who's listening to this and they're like, okay, I've heard of Swisse, I've heard of Wanderlust, but who is this Radek guy? Can you sum yourself up in not your bio, your elevator pitch? How do you describe yourself to people when they're like, hey, meet you at a party. Who are you? What do you do?
But before we go there, it would be remiss of us not to point out that moment where we had a picture in the national newspaper and launching
I forgot about that.
You did the most amazing yoga move standing next to me. So, yeah, that's always stuck with me.
Oh, gosh, I forgot about that. That was gold.
Leg up in the air like that.
Yeah, it happened with The Age, front page of The Age. I've got my leg over my head standing next to you.
Very
I've got
impressive.
to find that photo.
Yeah, somewhere online, I'm sure. So my elevator pitch is it's changed as I've kind of evolved. And so for now, I call myself an entrepreneur. I've had 7 startups and all of those have been across different industries. And I tend to sort of like to include reimaginations of businesses as well. And I also like to think of myself as someone that's kind of aware of the importance of what we do with our actions and kind of how important our kind of circle of influence is. So we as business leaders are in a kind of a unique time where, 4 out of 5 of us in Australia work in business, and the other 1 out of 5 are working with government. And so we're at this kind of weird inflection point of where our version of capitalism and democracy is kind of under threat if we don't look after it, in the true kind of survival of the best kind of system or the fittest. In however you think about it, the next best option at the moment, whether we like it or not, is capitalism with a dictatorship in place. So I see it as our responsibility to upbuild our system and improvement. It's got plenty of room for improvement, I agree, but I do think it's the best. We've managed to benefit a lot from here in this lucky country in Australia. So that's gone a little bit longer than a minute, hasn't it?
That's all right. We'll let that slide. You touched on quite a few things there, but a big part of that is, really being on purpose and doing things. I mean, like the tagline of your book, How to Build $1 Billion Businesses on Purpose, for Profit, with Passion. I mean, you did a good job. You brought all those things into your elevator pitch. Tick from my previous PR life would have given you a big green tick for that. But it's so important because we often hear, you vote with your dollar, but I also think that, you vote with your time and what you actually dedicate your time and your life to doing to bring about change on a bigger picture. So I want to dive into that today, but I kind of want to start at the beginning. For anyone who hasn't read your book, firstly, go out and read it, because it's not just some dry, boring business book. You've really done a great job of weaving in your life story into this, which makes it so digestible and so relatable for people as well. But hearing about your early life and your parents, we were chatting off air and I was saying, I need to get your dad on this podcast because he sounds like amazing, someone that held a vision for change, for being on purpose, for wanting to revolutionize, the medical industry for such a long time. And he would have just been knocked back, way back when. So can you just tell us a little bit, what was it like, firstly, growing up with parents like that, and what kind of impact have they had in those early years, to create the man that you are today?
Yeah, so mum and dad, essentially come from refugee families. My father's family came out in the 20s. Father first came out in the 20s, and then the rest of his family came out 10 years later from Albania, which was pretty war-torn and in an oppressive state of communism. And my mother was from the Czech Republic, and she was, Czechoslovakia as it was called then, and it was behind the Iron Curtain. And she was studying in the UK when something called the Prague Spring happened, which meant the Russians came in and said that their version of communism or socialism, which was evolving from communism to socialism, was too radical. And so they came back in and they took over the place and saw it as dangerous to kind of the dictated communist structure that we all well know. And so she wasn't allowed back into the country, so she was a political refugee. So both of them ended up in Australia. And so, I grew up with parents that were kind of strong on freedom and making sure that we do all we can to kind of building on the democracy we have. And then also they're kind of a bit different thinking. I think you're always different if you're not the norm in a society. And from that kind of background that, my father was the first professor from Albania, first person to go to university in Australia from Albania. And he was a tomato picker on farms. But that's pretty hard work when you're picking tomatoes up in Shepparton in 40 degrees every summer. And mum was studying the violin and rejected that because she wasn't able to go back to Czechoslovakia. So she got into medical scientist, but to support her studies, she was cleaning in the science lab where eventually my father met her. And so then I popped out while Dad was training in Scotland. And so I'm a true Aussie mongrel. I'm born in Scotland, mum's Czech and dad's Australian Albanian. So that then created this background of just thinking differently. And Dad, being a surgeon, he was quite unique in the fact that he wondered about the cause of chronic diseases. And so doctors are trained very well and still are trained very well to this day in fix-it medicine. To stop and look at the whole situation is just not kind of what the modality was created around originally in Western medicine. And obviously in Eastern medicine for the rest of the world, this is very unusual when we don't ask about the larger things going on in people's lives and why this may happen. And so when he started talking about diet causing disease, he was laughed at. And this was in the 70s. And it probably took 20 years for his work to be recognised and to be published in journals internationally. And it was JAMA and British Medical Journal, Journal of American Medicine, Modern Medicine. That was the two. And so, he was, got a really hard time. And then at the same time, my mum was studying medical science, and she was really interested in testing the nutrition in people's blood. And Dad had worked out that, you could test what nutrition, get people as healthy as possible by providing the right diet, but also supplements. And then also went into other areas like meditation and state of mind and helping people deal with chronic conditions through how they felt about life. The one thing that he'd always said to me, you could always tell whether someone wanted to get through their chronic ailment or not, because at the start of the session, they'd either say, "Doctor, tell me what I'm going to do to get over this," or completely go, I cannot believe that this has happened, and let it be what it is, and just allow Western medicine to do what it might be able to do in solving a condition like that. So yeah, and then Mum would cook really healthy. And so we would have things like tofu and brown rice, and I would eat strange things at school that everyone would kind of go, "What's in your lunchbox?" and Dad also advised on a thing called Life Be In It, which was the Norm campaign for the older people in your audience. It was lunches, healthy lunches that would go out to kids every day on a mass scale. So that was kind of the first national diet campaign that had come together. So there was a lot of lecturing, and Dad was a frustrated lecturer, being a professor. And he would talk to us a lot about all of these things like green bananas and how healthy they were for your as a prebiotic, and the gut and how important the gut is. And this was all happening back in the 70s, 80s. So, yeah, and how things have changed today.
Does he look at it now and just eye roll, or is he really happy at the work that he's done? Because now I feel like everything is about prebiotics and gut health, and he must just be like, "I've been trying to tell you people for 20-something years."
Oh, look, I think he's pretty satisfied with that change, but he does find new areas are opportunities, and, like enhanced cancer treatments by utilizing methods that have been used in Soviet Russia, like heat treatments and so forth, that enable the chemotherapy to work better. So he finds new areas that he sees as frustrating and should be making change and, having better patient health outcomes.
So was there a lot of pressure on you then growing up? Like, I can only imagine, your parents did so much, not only in their professional fields, but in the background, picking tomatoes and doing all these things to actually have the opportunity to do those things in a foreign country, to be immigrants. I can only imagine. I mean, our country's come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but I can only imagine how hard that would have been back then to be different, to be from a different country. Was there a lot of pressure on you growing up to be something? Did you feel like you needed to go to university and follow in their footsteps?
Oh, definitely. They wanted me to make sure I made the most of the opportunity that they'd created for me and my brother and sister. So there was pressure. I seemed to deal with it pretty well. I think the universe supported them in the fact that, it was about wellness, and they introduced me to things like Mangala Studios every Saturday morning, where I'd go and do Japanese ink brush painting, which had a bit of meditation as you mix the ink prior to doing Japanese calligraphy, which is a very meditative process. And then you would go into yoga. And then after that, you'd do some creative dance, which was, always my favorite part, until it worked out it wasn't that cool with the other kids at school. And but those sorts of things, and learning them from a young age, I suppose you start to get a sense of mindfulness young on, and kind of deal with whatever storm comes through that might be the pressure of the moment. My parents might be feeling something and saying, "Hey, you need to deliver." And I'd be pretty laconic in how I'd kind of deal with that, but also at that time let that storm pass through, and it wasn't that laconic at that moment. So yeah, there were moments of pressure.
Oh gosh, it's amazing. Hearing all of this about your story, it sounds like that early exposure to yoga, to meditation, has really had an impact. I know for me, it's had a huge impact on my intuitive ability to be able to, I guess, follow that intuition, regardless of whether the societal norm or even the logical mind tells me otherwise. how much of an impact does following your intuition have, in the way you run your business now, but also in how it led you to where you are today? Like, has it always been something within you that you've been able to listen to and follow?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in always having kind of an underlying belief that everything's going to be okay, as long as I continue to follow what is my intuition. And, in the book, I talked to this weird moment, which became obviously quite weird when I looked back on it, because I went, oh, I really did believe this at the time it all happened. One of my biggest beliefs growing up, as an innocent 5 to, I think it was 12 years old, can remember how much pain the whole system of communism had on my parents and their lives and the families, our direct family that was all involved with it and the families connected to it. And so it was my kind of one thing that I'd think about a lot, that was that, I'd hope that would change and their world would become much more like our world, a freer society, something that was reinforced by my parents all the time, and how much better we had it here as a result of, the better system of government and society we lived in. And that eventually happened. The wall fell and the Iron Curtain fell away, and there was no violence with all of that. And so that was, I felt like I'd had an impact on that with my intention and my hope, and me wishing for that every time I would blow candles out or anything where there was an opportunity to think about what you wanted most. And so that is weird, and probably a bit irrational, but it did kind of create a formative sense of vision and how important that is to have, and kind of where you want to go and what you want to achieve with your life, and, how you're going to set intentions to get there and take that step by step. And so, yeah, my intuition has been something that I feel like I continue to try and refine, listen to, and at times where I am not in tune with it, I do find my life isn't following what I feel is my purpose. And if I try and ignore that, things don't go very well for me. So I see that as a really important part of my makeup.
Yeah, ignoring what you know, it never goes well. So your entrepreneurial journey, I think when we think of entrepreneurs, often there's an assumption of like you've created your own product and brought that to market, and that's kind of your journey. But your entrepreneurial journey has really been, I guess, taking the mindset and the way in which your brain works as an entrepreneur into existing businesses and just, taking them to the absolute next level. Did you always know that you were going to become an entrepreneur? Was that always something that was kind of, on your vision board? And did you always think that you were going to do it in this way of being able to work within an existing business? Or, you said you've started 7 different things that you've done. Did you always know that was going to be your path?
I always felt that business was where I'd probably end up. I kind of fantasized being a doctor, but saw how much it frustrated my father and my mother to an extent, and how much time he needed to spend bringing people along for that journey. So I don't think that changes, funnily enough, if you're passionate about what you do and you are trying to change the dynamics of how something's done. And that's what entrepreneurs set out to do. But I did think that, there was a way to kind of create a bigger narrative or a bigger story around the issues with our system, and for people to think more broadly about their health rather than just the fix-it modality. Why not combine it all and create an aspiration around that? And so, as a kid, I always loved movies too, and cinemas and the escapism of that. And so I was lucky enough to get a job in a cinema at a very young age and treat that as seriously as my university degree. I quickly realised that, I was paying for my university degree and I was getting paid for what was the kind of the basics of business in running a cinema. And so I went with that, and you had to learn to kind of manage your friends. And as I went with it, more responsibility came with that, but also the challenge of bringing your friends along for the ride and getting them excited about upselling popcorn or cleaning cinemas. So I had to do it in a way that, I wasn't a dickhead, and I was a good person. I was consistent and authentic to who I was, and had to create respect between friendships rather than, friendships for the sake of being friends in a friend scenario. We need to be consistent right through. And so pretty early on, I quickly kind of got this whole notion, which, someone who's very dear to both of us in Johnny Pollard, he shared and articulated with me so beautifully once, is just choosing to be elite in whatever we do and choosing to bring our best. And it kind of struck me that early on I was very lucky to kind of work out that if I'm at work, as we get older, it becomes most of our working hours. We need to bring our best. This is our profession. And if we're not doing that, we're letting ourselves down. And so this is going back to our intuition. Our intuition wants us to, be everything we can. And if we're not following the right path, that everything we can or potential of what we can isn't right. And so it should feel like a joy to do what we do. And, this is where our society is pretty unique like that, is that, we have so many different professions, so much opportunity. We can choose and pick what, does match our lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that creating your own lifestyle element is something that we are very fortunate in this country and in our society to have the opportunity to be able to do. I think we often forget that and can get a bit stuck. You touched on something then with your journey, working through the ranks at Village. And this is something that I experienced as well, studying at university, and then on the side of that, doing all these internships and trying to get as much in-person experience as I can. And I had the same realization of like, hang on a second, I'm actually going to learn way more actually doing this than I am by studying this. Does that, when you're looking for people nowadays to work within, one of your many organizations, do you look at the knowledge that they have versus the experience? Or is it more, that person's got in there and got their hands dirty and learnt on the job, as opposed to, you ticked a bunch of, boxes at university?
Well, I think that you never get all the answers from meeting, a set level of kind of learnings. It depends on the individual. So I always start on, are they a great person and do you want to be around them? And do you feel like that they're going to help you grow as much as that person being open to grow as well? So that's a really important starting point for me. But then, nothing can replace life experience, practical experience, university experience. Being open to those things, I think it's really important. And, too often I will meet really smart entrepreneurs who have got an amazing idea, but I do have to say to them that I just don't think you're personally ready to bring this to life. And I think that you may be better off, it's great that you've got an amazing university degree and got this great idea and have amazing talent, say in writing or whatever their chosen profession may be. I do say that, go and do a year in a big corporate or two in a big business where you go and learn the processes of business, the language of business, the structures that enable businesses, big businesses, to get big. And so I see this a lot in entrepreneurial businesses that we invest in, is where the founder finds it difficult to let go because they haven't learned about how to create accountabilities, give people buy-in, and have structures around that, meeting structures that enable them to not have to be in every meeting and having a value set that is essentially what they set out to do, but it's a value set that guides the business with or without them to make decisions. So, once a business gets to a certain size, it is really challenging for that business to grow. And Swisse was one of those where it got to a certain size. And those first sort of $10 million worth of sales are the hardest sales. I have to say that, that is, having now done that a few times over from the start point, it is the most challenging time forming the business. But once it's formed, the next challenge is how it carries on and continue to grow with or without that founder being all over every decision.
Today's episode is brought to you by my very first book that has just launched, Find Your Flow. Are you stuck in a perpetual cycle of repeating the same patterns over and over? Do you know there's more to life than just following what you should do? Do you feel foggy in your mind, uninspired by your life? Are you sick of being in survival mode? Let go of your addiction to friction and drama with this practical personal development guide to freeing yourself from limiting beliefs. Learn how to respond to life rather than react, and move from surviving to thriving with me. I am so excited to release this book baby out into the world. Find Your Flow is available for pre-order now. Head to the show notes to grab your copy. Today's episode is sponsored by Brower. Sore muscles, achy joints, Arnica is your secret weapon against pain. Brower's Arnica Ease range can help you ease pain and keep moving with their easy-to-apply, no-odor gels and creams and convenient on-the-go tablets and oral spray. Get back to feeling your best with ingredients traditionally used in homeopathic medicine. Shop the range at brower.com.au. Always read the label and follow the directions for use. Yeah, absolutely. Is that, I noticed it when I was teaching yoga at Swisse. I was doing lots in the corporate space at that time. This is a few years back. And so much of my work, it felt like I was the token person. They'd bring in, here's the token yoga meditation session. And some people were into it, some people weren't. It was just kind of this thing that workplaces were doing to make it like tick a box. And I remember walking into Swisse, and literally from the first moment I walked in, I thought, gosh, these people genuinely seem like they want to be here. Like, this actually seems like a cool place to work. And after a few weeks of coming and running sessions, I was like, geez, maybe I should work here. This place seems awesome. Like, not only was the office great, but the overall vibe. And I think that that's something that, you can see a place aesthetically, but the feeling within those offices was people felt the impression I had was that they felt valued. They wanted to be there. The wellness aspect wasn't just some token thing that no one really used. There was people in the gym. There was people. It really felt thriving in that way. How did you actually create, because obviously it's a wellness company, right? So people would think, oh, most people that work there are into wellness, but probably not. They might just be great marketers or whatever. How do you actually bring in those values so that it was palatable, the actual way that those people, the employees were living that as part of their experience in the workplace?
Yeah, thank you for the kind feedback. Look, there's kind of many ways that we would bring that to life, but it was as important as our business plan. So every business has a business plan, but for us, our culture plan was reviewed and focused on as much as that business plan. So you'd have KPIs for how the business is performing, and also KPIs for culture. And culture is a little bit different because it's kind of more behavioural. But there are ways to measure it. There are tools out there that are very useful. But, you do need to think about the behaviours, and behaviours are kind of not like numbers where they mean one thing. So someone from the warehouse or the warehouse team would think about, our values of people, principles and passion coming before profit very differently to how someone in the sales team would think about it, or the marketing team. And so what we'd ask them to do is talk to examples of each of those kind of 4 value structures that we're all aligned around, much like you have buckets in a business plan around financials, human resources, marketing and sales, for instance, or distribution or operations. We would have the same thing around our value sets. And then we'd have a language around that, or a framework that was very constructive and a positive way in bringing to life what our culture actually stood for. And so we wouldn't have words like problem, we'll just have challenge instead, because problems weren't what we faced. We would replace things like dear at the start of an email with great day to you or fantastic one to you. So these were choices of more positive words. We wouldn't say exactly the words that people would need to use, but we would say challenge the norms, make sure you stand out from others that communicate, day to day. So people would know that you were engaging with the Swiss culture. And so the other thing we did that was really important too was nagging, which my mum was, thankfully great at and taught me a lot about. But I needed to kind of rethink that level of nagging and kind of think about that as a communications plan. And so that communication plan, after we would do, regular reviews on our business, say every quarter or every 6 months, depends on kind of where we're heading, or even monthly, we'd do the same around culture. And then after that session, we'd agree, okay, well, now how many times are we going to meet And how many times are we going to send emails, or how many times will I need to speak as the CEO, or will, as managers of your specific areas in the business, talk to your team about, how we're progressing against our culture goals, how we're progressing against our business goals. And so that permission to nag is really, really important. That permission to encourage people to be better. I go back to, if you're taking a yoga class, if you say at the start of the yoga class, looking around, gee, everyone looks pretty tired today. And then you start with your first downward dog and you say to everyone, look, I'm not seeing much strength in the room. We're not going to get through this. That is the language that most workplaces have in trying to achieve things. You're not going to achieve in that yoga class progression unless you've got that teacher guiding you and supporting you. And it's no good if that student's turning around to that teacher and saying, I don't agree with what you're saying. So it just doesn't work that way functionally. So we create all of this kind of ability for people to talk and for it to be okay to be coached, but also to enable people opportunities to talk about what enables them to be their best and what they need to hear from their leaders as well. So, yeah, it was an intricate plan to get to that point.
And that language piece is, there's a whole chapter in my book around this, about the words that we use essentially cast spells and create our reality. Like, a big part of the way our mindset is essentially, what are the words that you're using to actually create your experience, in that situation. So yeah, I love that example that you just shared. How important for you has it? I say mindset, but actually my partner Tyson challenged me on this recently. He was like, why my mindset? Because, if you think about that as a word, you're set in that mindset. He likes to call it mind flex, because, it's that idea of, if you become so rigidly attached to something, then you're set on that. You're not open to other ways of doing things and other ways of being. So we'll call it mindset because people know what that means, but we're meaning a more flexible, approach to that. We still need to, rework that word. But how important has that overall mindset been for you as a business owner? Because I know you share this in the book, the different trials and tribulations and things that you've been able to work through. But I would say that you're someone that, from reading your book and from knowing you, has very much a growth mindset. You're able to see a situation and go, okay, how can we work with this, rather than, sitting there and going, oh, well, we're all too tired to do the downward dog, it's not going to work, and that kind of woe is me mentality. You're able to see things in a way that you see the opportunity for growth. How important for that has that been in your overall journey to become, the multiple successful entrepreneur that you are today?
Well, you and Tyson are all over it. Mindset and Mindflex. I love Mindflex. We had a similar scenario with Brainstorm. We would say blue sky instead. A bit of freedom of thoughts rather than them. Yeah, I agree that language is just so important, and kind of language does prompt us to rethink things. So Mindflex immediately takes me to a place of change. And, we are creatures of habit. We have a word for it as humans. We struggle with change. I always ask rooms about how, who here loves change, and you get a few people putting their hands up, and then I kind of say, how do you feel about not brushing your teeth every day, or not going to bed at the same time every night, or waking up at different times, or being in different beds every night? We love structure and we thrive under structure. So we need immense encouragement for change, and also rationale for why we're doing it. And so it's really important that, we who may be asking as a business leader for a business to change, we're kind of reviewing what we're prepared to change to, and how we're prepared to develop as an individual. So I'd always ask myself quite regularly, in kind of in line with business planning, like we do culture planning, is what have been the changes that I've tried to make better leader? And then, what are my expectations fair for the rest of the team to continue to evolve like I expect them to do? And so it's an interesting exercise to do. But then also, looking around at those that have been most successful, the most successful entrepreneurs that, and if you think about the biggest businesses in the world, it's quite ironic that it is, in most cases, the founder is still in charge of that business. And if they're not, that business might still be thriving, but it's perhaps not as visionary as it once was. I can use an example of Steve Jobs and Apple. And Apple was the most revolutionary company in the world, and probably now is, still an amazingly successful organization. But It's not reinventing the way we use our phone or reinventing the way we think about listening to music. It's still, technologically advanced, but, not creating the next iPad. It's changed. And that's because that founder who started with who's definitely passionate about change and definitely on the kind of cusp of being able to push an organization to its limit. And I could use countless examples like that with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, even Oprah Winfrey, and how much her career has kind of gone from acting, talk show to now media network. So yeah, change is so important. It's so challenging, but so rewarding when we give into it.
Yeah, and it's always struck me that it is one of the only inevitable things in life is change, and that it's part realistic, but that you're going to die at some point. And yet it is the thing that humans struggle with facing the most is, change and our mortality. So I love that you just shared that. And those examples are so great because they really do show, what you're essentially speaking to then is that evolutionary process of something is no longer relevant. Let's let it dissolve to make space for creation to come through. And if we stay stuck in maintaining that ever repeating known, there's no progress that comes from that. There's that saying of, adapt or die. You see so many businesses that stay so steadfast in maintaining what they do that they just, like Kodak, these kinds of companies are great examples of that. They go from being these amazing things to see you later, bye. So that ability, I think, to be able to stay on the front foot of that is a really great skill, to be able to be okay with the uncomfortability of change. How has that played out for you now going into, Swisse is a great example because you came into a business that, was already established in the market and were able to go in there and if I didn't know better, I would say, oh yeah, Radek, he founded Swisse. He started that because it genuinely felt like you treated that as if that was yours. Like you were the Steve Jobs of that. No disrespect to the founder, but you were the Steve Jobs of that. Your vision was able to come through. And then, Wanderlust as well. Like that's a brand that I worked with before your time. And I can say it was a very different experience to, the Wanderlust that we know today with your involvement within that. And that's testament to you as a person. But what's that like then going in? Like, do you see these businesses like Swisse and like Wanderlust and, the other businesses that you invest in? Do you see the vision and that's what makes you be able to get in there and drive it as if it, was yours to begin with? Is that how it plays out for you?
Look, I think it goes back to kind of that founder mentality and that balance of having big business thought mixing in with kind of owning something and owning your own impact in that organization as much as kind of the team around you. So building that team is so key. And sometimes from the outside, when you're not in it day to day, you can see the kind of opportunity for an amazing foundation of a business. And so Swisse was one of those, and Wanderlust was another that came along a little bit later in the journey. Actually, while I was at Swisse, we were doing something called the Colour Run there. And we had 250,000 people doing that each year, and it would raise a couple $1 million for charity. And I thought, oh, look, it was called the Swisse Colour Run. We brought it out from the US, and I thought, oh, people can get sick of having colour thrown at them, even though it's great fun. We need to find something that's more sustainable. And I saw this, my favourite artist, funnily enough, in Michael Franti. I saw he was playing music to yoga. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That looks like a good last. Yoga's been around for a few thousand years, so it's going to carry on longer than this. Well, Diwali festival goes on for a bit too. But anyway, all these beautiful Indian synchronicities in our life. But back to Wanderlust, we kind of went at trying to bring that to Australia and have the rights for it. And thankfully, we couldn't get the rights. We just became a sponsor because if we'd got the rights, it would have been a Swisse asset. And then a few years later, I didn't have any non-competes when we sold Swisse, which was great, but also I'd never go back to that same category or industry with something that was just a Me Too version of what Swisse, say, stood for, or the many other brands that are already well established in the category. So after a few years, I kind of went, oh, that Wanderlust thing was pretty cool. And the way it was kind of looking at the total wellness program, not only in the nutrition, the mindfulness and the movement. And we were doing that within Swisse as, you were coming in and experiencing with our team. How do we do that externally and help the everyday person feel what it was like to work in an organisation like Swisse and create a lifestyle that was congruent with that. So, yeah, Wanderlust, we managed to get to know the founders. And one of the founders had stayed on to run the events business. They'd been bought by private equity. The other one, he was building a digital ecosystem within Wanderlust. But the PE group said, no, we just want to focus on events. So he went and started up Commune himself, One Commune, which is like a Netflix for wellness. And it's got all these amazing teachers like Wim Hof, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra offering courses on there. And it has now 40,000 subscribers, 450,000 podcast downloads a month. And so we're the second largest shareholder in that. And then Wanderlust, what I saw as the missing piece around events, because with private equity it didn't work out, was that they needed to find a sustainable product. And so the product that made sense, and a whole lot of sense, and makes sense in more ways than one, is a plant-based product, which is the basis of Ayurvedic medicine, which is what yoga stands for. And then you've got this beautiful shavasana and meditation that goes with that, and all of the learnings of life. And so then we bring, aspirational characters like we are in Commune in a digital format, but also in a live format, which is what the Wanderlust events already do. And so we're kind of refining that in this day and age where festivals are getting more and more challenging to run because of the costs that continue to increase. But, we've got, for instance, Drew Barrymore coming out in August, and that's been a huge success for us. We're pretty much sold out. We've been holding on to some tickets because we're going to announce some amazing guests to join her on the couch as that tours around Australia. And then we've got other big names like that, where they're telling these aspirational stories of leadership. And then you'll have a mass meditation to begin with. We'll have yoga on the stage, playing to music, and people being able to interact and do workshops in and around the event. And as they become larger, we will have festivals come back as people understand what we're trying to deliver. But then we've got the products, that are available on the shelves year round, and being plant-based, there's so many synthetics that are used for vitamins and minerals in particular, and herbals through our food, and being whole food, the best way to ingest our nutrition. And our big point of difference was and is liquid extraction, so the cold press extraction of herbs that delivers a wonderful product that our body absorbs and is unique to the market, and was only available through practitioners that didn't taste that great. And we've only used natural ingredients like orange essence or a lemon essence, depending on, the profiling. We did about 3 years work in getting the taste right. And so we've found that being really successful in broadening, people's connection with what comes from Mother Nature and how much difference it can make in combination with Ayurveda, which is yoga and meditation. So it's a beautiful thing.
It feels like a beautiful nod to, I guess, your upbringing, that beautiful full circle of going back around to, those influences of your dad and of those early yoga classes that you did as a kid. And now it's like, here you are running yoga festivals and, making those beautiful herbs and medicinal mushrooms and things like that available to the masses. Like it's when you look at it, when you zoom out on your story, it's a beautiful example of a life in flow, of being able to look back on the overall picture of your life and just see how you were being so guided, and those themes were kind of just winding through to essentially, land you where you are today. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Sometimes.
So what's next? Are you in a place right now? I mean, people who listen to this podcast will probably be familiar with my book, where I speak a lot about, and I know that you're familiar with as well, that the cycle of creation, maintenance, and dissolution or destruction. Where are you at in your cycle right now? Are you creating more things? Are you in a maintenance phase? What's happening in Rad's world?
Yeah, so we've had, the kind of wellness arm is led by Wanderlust and Commune. Then we've got our kind of impact banking arm, which we feel like is a huge opportunity to kind of take the fifth largest pension fund in the world, our superannuation, so largest per capita savings in the world, to kind of put that to work on things like disability housing, affordable housing, land regeneration work, and deliver 7 to 12% returns, which is the expectation around those kind of investment funds. So what we're trying to do is point those funds at making our society better. So having an impact through creating purpose around how capitalism can work and improve our system. So that's another half of our world. And then also just looking at ways that we can, build on our knowledge of what we've built through Commune and Wanderlust, and then invite other brands that are wellness focused into that space and support them in their journeys in, bringing to, a bigger market in Australia, but then also taking them overseas. We've had a fair share of overseas learnings, and many times I should have been fired from those learnings, but I managed to hold on and learn a lot and feel like we've got a lot to share in helping brands, great Australian organisations wanting to expand internationally. And so, looking forward to being in less of the day-to-day in businesses like Wanderlust, and then, moving on to the next, because I absolutely agree with you. We're not in that kind of flow of creation, maintenance, and then accepting destruction, which is inevitable for us all. We're not really changing, and we're not challenging ourselves to be better, which helps me thrive, and that's where I need to be.
It sounds like you are very much aligned and on purpose. I'd love to chat to you literally all day, but I want to end with just a very simple question. If you were going back, if someone's listening to this and they're like, that's all good and well for you, you've built billion-dollar businesses, you're doing all these things, but I'm just at the beginning of that. I'm just thinking about, that leaving my job and doing that entrepreneurial pursuit, or, studying something different, or whatever it is. What do you say to that person who wants to pursue a life of entrepreneurship through the lens of, everything we've spoken about, doing it on purpose, in alignment with, support from nature, in alignment with your own individual journey? What advice would you have to that person starting out who is literally going, okay, all this sounds great, but where do I start?
Well, I think that the thing is that I kind of never set out for us to be $1 billion business. It was my intention or my intuition that led us there, not the intention, my intuition that led us there, because intuitively I always knew that we were going to be successful. But starting out was the great joy. And, the ending part of where we got to, I think I ended up having chicken soup. I explained that in the story. It wasn't the hugest of celebrations when we got it done. The joy was in, the process. And yes, I just pointed to the fact that kind of a little bit earlier in the chat, that sort of first 10 million of revenue, or even just your first level of revenue that makes you sustainable, is the hardest part, the most challenging part. And so knowing that things will get easier as you practice them, it's a little bit like, again, if you're going to your first yoga lesson, it's hard and your body's going to be sore afterwards. And if you keep pushing for it, it becomes easier. Or meditation, the same thing. It is difficult the first few times, in particular if you're not doing the right sort of meditation that agrees with you. You've got to find the right modality that you enjoy and you look forward to, but also it's going to take some effort. And there's no reason why work can't be like that. And so I talk about not work-life balance, it's work-life integration. It's got to feel great what you're thinking about. It's not always going to feel great, but, the majority of the time you feel like you're doing the right thing and you don't mind your thoughts going towards the work you do. And so it can't be a separate part of how you go about life. It needs to be something that you're really proud of and you want to talk about. My wife's a beekeeper and she loves talking bees, and to the point of everything she reads about is about bees. And she's a natural beekeeper, and then how she's going to help people understand, what it is to be a natural beekeeper and how to nurture that kind of bee's life, as a priority before commercial outcomes is a real challenge. And so that's a challenge that we talk about regularly. And, I would then break that down to the same as all the businesses we're involved with and some of the challenges we face, and then how we're going to overcome them. And that excites me. And so that's what I would say is that, anyone that's kind of going through that process is that it must excite them. It must feel great to talk about what they're doing. And in our book, we share just insights about that journey and hopefully can help make it a little bit easier. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, we were missing that one piece around the flywheel that we talked to, which was our repeatable wheel of how we ended up getting more successful at what we did at Swisse. And so, that feels great in being able to share that bit and they go, oh, we realized we weren't following a process around that. And so hopefully in kind of sharing around the things that we had kind of learnt the hard way and documenting that, we're going to make it a whole lot easier for people to get to that place of joy and really enjoy the journey they're on.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for your time today. I will pop a link to your incredible book in the show notes. For anyone who is looking to connect, where is the best place they can find you?
Just my name, on LinkedIn.
Love it. He's a LinkedIn guy. Thanks, Rad. I appreciate your time today.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much for generously having me on your show.
Anytime. Thank you so much for lending me your ears. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I can't wait to hear what you think. There is so much gold in here. I'm so grateful for Rad's time on the podcast today. He is just such an inspiring person and so beautiful and friendly and giving with his time to be around. So thank you, Rad, for joining me. And if you liked today's episode, you know what to do. Go and leave me a review, please. It helps me to reach more people and keeps me going on this beautiful passion project that is running a podcast. I will be back in your ears again soon.